I'm pleased to announce that our program goes on, and we move on to the afternoon sessions to a very interesting conversation on fostering innovation and green technological development. I'm pleased to say that in the lineup for this session, we will have 4 great speakers, great thinkers, and leaders in their fields. And the moderation will be in the good hands of Ms. Ana Maria Cătăuță, whom I invite on stage. She's an Aspen Fellow and also a member of the Romanian Parliament. And she's going to do a very, very good introduction for the speakers and for the session. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mirela. No pressure. We have a wonderful panel today. It's not easy to moderate after Clara Volintiru. It's an honor, but also a very, very huge responsibility. So I am very happy to have today with me Ms. Larisa Liebeck. She is CAF's Senior Director in Europe and in the Middle East, leading CAF's climate strategy to advance a broad portfolio of solutions in both regions. Ms. Daniela Lulache, the Head of Policy and Coordination of the Nuclear Energy Agency of the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, OECD. Hello. Mr. Alessio Menegazzo, who was very recently appointed as the CEO and country manager of the PPC companies in Romania. Welcome, Alessio. And Mr. Kurt Weber, who is the managing director of Horvat's Bucharest office since 2009. Thank you all so much for being here. Our panel is about green technology, fostering innovation, and I would start by asking you, how will the European Union, who has set very, very ambitious goals for decarbonization, with different thresholds, 2030, 2050, how will the EU and the EU member states be able to do this at a decent cost? Or maybe it's better to say, is that possible to have decarbonization and to invest in green energies, but also to do this at a decent cost for public budgets in the European Union? Yeah.
Yeah, thanks so much, Anna, for having us here, for moderating the panel, and thanks so much to Aspen Institute Romania for inviting me. Clean Air Task Force is a global climate organization, and we focus on the US, Europe, the Middle East, and Africa. And in Europe, over the past year, we've been really rethinking the way how Europe should approach decarbonization. I think there's the most important aspect here is climate goals matter, but what really matters is how you plan to achieve them. And I think the most important point is that in the European climate debate, on the European Union level in particular, economic security and energy security have been disjointed or disconnected from the climate debate. And this is the most important shift that has to happen over the next couple of years. And so if we're looking at 55% of emissions reductions expected from mostly renewables and energy efficiency, that's actually not suitable for a diverse set of countries that make up the European Union today. So I think, and this is in part in addition to headwinds that we're facing, energy security crisis, high interest rates, price pressure, questionable energy imports. Europe is the biggest energy importer in the world. And then, of course, many of the technologies that we're relying off are already on track, thinking about the need to build an additional 100 gigawatts of wind between now and 2030 as an example. Nuclear is being debated, extremely politicized, but could actually help in the long run. And so I think what we would like to see is a more options-based strategy where we allow each country or each region to choose the mix that is most suitable for its political economy, its economic circumstances, and that includes all options, all clean energy options, and really focuses on reducing cost and the availability of electricity. So the last point that I will make is Europe is the biggest energy importer in the world. The grid, the decarbonized grid, depends heavily on electricity. It will be 3 to 4 times as big as it is today, and it is unclear to this point where all of this electricity is going to come from in the future.
I'm pretty sure at least one of the panelists has the answer for your last question. But I would pass the floor now to Ms. Lulake. Can we achieve a cleaner energy with low costs, or at least costs that will not have a huge impact upon our public budgets?
Hello, everyone, and thank you very much for the question for inviting me here today. I will start by saying clearly, yes, I like to believe that we can achieve that. Of course, it's not easy. Of course, nothing is granted here, but there are solutions. And continuing the idea of my fellow speaker, I think what we are observing today, it is clearly a major shift. We are talking already for a long time about decarbonization, about the needs to achieve climate goals, but for many, many years it was rather a theoretical discussion. As well, it was a discussion about the energy security, about the security of supply, about are we competitive or not as country, as region, within the larger environment. Our observation is that clearly these conversations, which until very recently were silo conversations, really started to merge. We start to observe countries changing their national strategies. We observe countries which, for example, until very recently didn't consider nuclear in their energy mix, are now completely, sometimes over the night and in a very special, spectacular manner, I would say, including nuclear in their energy mix. And this happens for some very clear reasons. One, it helps to the competitivity of the prices, while in the same time ensuring at least partially the achievement of our climate goals. However, we are not yet there. In order to achieve that, there are still things to be done. And for example, quite recently, a month ago, we had at the NEA a major event, I would say, for this conversation, for what's going on in the world nowadays, which reunited over 20 ministers of energy from the most advanced countries having nuclear energy in their production mix, in order to tackle, okay, if we reach the conclusion that we cannot achieve the climate goals without nuclear, that we cannot continue to be dependent on fossil fuels supplied by countries which are not necessarily ready to supply whenever we need, and that we start to have a competitive solution, and nuclear is part of that, it's clear that the current mechanisms we do have do not completely respond to the needs. And I will close just by saying that we definitely need to tackle financing of large investment in general in the electricity production, in energy production, but especially in nuclear. And in order to achieve that, clearly we have to get into the conversation the multilateral development banks, the international financial institutions, to be able to attract private investment, private capital, public-private partnerships. All these are part of the solution which needs to be considered and to be integrated within governmental policies as well as in international cooperation. Thank you.
Alessio. Because Ms. Lulake mentioned competitive solutions, but to have competitive prices, what do we have to do to have green energy at competitive prices?
So let's assess a little bit the semantics. We are not speaking about cost. So the energy transition is not a cost, it's an investment. Cost is something that you use, you drop your money, and you lose it. We are speaking about investment. So why can we and should we invest in renewables, generally speaking? Because it is the cheapest form of energy production that we have as of today. We are speaking about production in several countries in the world, also in Europe, it is around 10-15 euros per kilowatt hour. So it's the cheapest form of energy that we can achieve today. This means that beside the ideological discussion that we can have or not have, it's about the economy. So if we want to be competitive in the future, we have to ensure that we have the cheapest form of energy possible. And renewables are today the cheapest way in which you can provide energy to the end customer. Because it's around, it can achieve 10-15 euros per megawatt hour, per kilowatt hour. It's the cheapest. So if we start from this concept, we should build everything else around this. How can we ensure that we have the most possible of this cheap source of energy available to the end consumer, households or also industrials, okay? The rest should go around this major topic and major subject. Everything else is a discussion of the past. And Romania is a country that is proving this, because without having any kind of policy, without having any kind of regulation that today is not working, but it will be fixed, in 1.5 years, we went from 0 prosumers to a quantity of prosumers that today are generating more power than the 2 nuclear plants, Cernavoda 1, Cernavoda 2. So, consumers and availability of technology, which again goes in the direction of having a cheap price, okay, are driving the discussion. Unfortunately, most of the time, we see things in the energy sector as big, huge, among us, gazillions of investment, which is a discussion of the past. Generation of energy is something that will be more and more decentralized and will need a high degree of flexibility, which means networks, okay? So this is the new paradigm. Then, of course, are we going to have cheap energy for everybody in 1 week? No, it's impossible. This is why it's called a transition. So, if we set the timeline for the transition, let's say 20 years, okay, it's reasonable, and we set that this is our landing zone to have cheap energy that is coming from, let's say, a secure commodity, because one of the things that we are all aware, and we faces the crisis 1.5 years, is that one can temper if you have a good, for example, gas, okay, and you supply a market who is dependent of this gas, you can very easily temper that good, that commodity, and you create a dependency in which you don't control anything. So the other positive aspect of renewables is that you don't depend from other countries' decisions. And Russia, before invading Ukraine, started, let's say, antagonistic approach towards Europe with the energy crisis driven by the increased cost of gas that we all bought because it was cheap from Russia, okay? And then at one point we were not in control of anything. So commodity, availability for the customer, cheap prices, we have to go in the direction of ensuring cheap energy to end consumers and get rid of the commodity risk. Renewables are the technology available today that matches all these boxes. So the discussion has to go around this and how to, let's say, make it secure.
Thank you so much. Mr. Weber, you've been in Romania long enough to also better understand what are the challenges that Romania is facing in this green transition.
Yeah, thank you. I'm actually born here, so
Oh.
I was just away for a few years, but
Sorry
thanks for
this.
asking. No problem. So I think Alessio, I want to pick up where Alessio actually stopped. No, so what are the challenges? I think indeed it is we are carrying discussions of the past. No, I think the solutions are on the table. Alessio mentioned them. I think green energy is the solution, but we need to see what is missing actually to benefit from the lower cost. No? So if you look at overall at the so-called levelized cost of energy, so green, solar, and wind power is the cheapest of all technologies. Yeah? And Romania is in the unique position. It's a few countries in Europe which actually have the advantages nature has given countries. Yeah? We have wind, we have sun. Yeah, but we are not utilizing it. Yeah? That's the problem. So now the reasons why. I think one of the key problems is that we do not have strategies and legislation in place. Yeah, we are having this NECP, this strategy. It's from 2019. It's outdated, but it's still not, let's say, applied. So this is a general problem we are having. We are constantly actually behind when it comes to legislation, bylaws, and methodology you need to make something work. The second thing is, I think, also the money we have secured in Brussels, modernization fund, PNRR. Yeah? So where are we standing there? Yeah? This money, so the first call for the RES project has been 1.5 years ago. I know a lot of companies which still got a positive, their application has been positively evaluated. They are still waiting to sign some contracts. But the time is expiring to actually implement this project. So this is a very good example how we miss opportunities. No? The second thing is, Alessio mentioned it, network access. No? Are we really doing everything to make sure that we can bring on stream all of these projects? And I think, again, where is the modernization fund? I think it's an area where the modernization fund should be used to, let's say, help Transelectrica, help all the grid operators really to get access. But instead, what are we doing? We are coming with legislation, which is taking away the cash from the companies. They are canceling their investment plans, and so we cannot create the necessary connectors we need to bring all those RES projects on stream. And these are, I think, the typical challenges, which are actually putting us always is driving up the cost. It's driving up the cost of energy. That's the reason. No, nothing else. No, and I think one last aspect I want to mention. I think. We need to move faster because otherwise we will have big problems in industrial and the transportation sector, as well as in what they call hard-to-abide sectors, metallurgy, chemical industry, fertilizers. So they need solutions. And the only solution they can get to decarbonize is hydrogen, is green hydrogen, or let's say low-carbon hydrogen. But for that, again, you need green energy. Yeah, so that they can replace coal and natural gas and other conventional resources.
because you mentioned hydrogen, one good thing that the Romanian parliament has done is the fact that we have passed legislation regarding hydrogen. I think we're one of the first in Europe. I will come back to you because you mentioned at the beginning that each of the countries, the nation states, should choose its own mix. And the gentlemen were mentioning the fact that we need to improve the network access. But what about storage? Because we talk about these new technologies, and I'm pretty sure that changing the way, of course, we're in a transition period, but the goal is to change the way in which we produce energy and to go towards a more greener way. But this also means that other industries will also develop. So how do you see the storage industries developing in the next few years?
Yeah, thank you so much for this follow-up question. And I also want to touch on a couple of things that my panelists touched on. I think one of the most important aspects in the planning, and thanks for mentioning the NECPs, is really thinking through what does a European-wide energy system look like and how can we build it in the most efficient way. The smallest land use footprint, because there's not a lot of land in Europe compared to other regions, and the most efficient way to use transmission, for example. I think storage is promising if it can be long duration, which we're hoping to come or to develop in the future. But I think it's really about the options, right? The more options we have available at scale, the lesser the risk of any of them failing. If we put all of our eggs in one basket, and this is my personal problem with saying, oh, renewables are going to do it all. And actually the supply chains, 93% of critical minerals were dependent on China right now. This is a carbon copy of the supply dependency on Russian natural gas. And so I think we have to be really prudent about the future and plan and think through where can we get the supply chains, but also what technologies can we and what industries can we build natively here in Europe. And I think this is an industrial policy approach, which of course then conflicts with the need for globalization. So there's some sort of globalization light that I think will happen in the future because we want to keep costs low. An industrial policy-only approach will have skyrocketing costs, right? And I think it's really in this new fragmented world order where we're pushing the limits of multilateralism. It's really about smart bilateral partnerships. What can the EU do with African countries, with Middle Eastern countries, with the United States, with reliable allies? But what is the opportunity also that gives us the ability to pivot? And I think, so that means we can't just rely on energy efficiency and renewables only. And then I think the last point that I want to make is, I think we're hearing a lot of, it depends on project execution, on permitting, on funding, on bureaucracy. I think all of these things can be streamlined in Europe, can be made much more efficient. There will be limited capital in the near future. Much more capital is going to go to defense and security concerns first. And then I think on industry, it's not just hydrogen. Hydrogen, again, 90% of the projects that have been announced are at early stages of development. Only 6% have final investment decision, and it takes multiple years to realize them, right? So I think there's other technologies such as carbon capture and storage, again, electricity, biomethane, that we need to take into account. And if one of them fails, demand for the other rises. So there is a complexity in the transition that hasn't really been appreciated in my mind.
Because we've had a conversation on China prior to starting the panel. Alessia, what do you think about this concern that some of us have that we might be too dependent on China when it comes to renewable energies?
Well, today we are dependent from Russia, and we are dependent on a daily basis from Russia. So what I want to say is that, again, I get back to the commodity. Mm-hmm. If you buy PV today, you have an appliance that you will install and you will use for 15 years, okay? So yes, today we have a supply chain problem in Europe because we have been lazy, and we have been lazy because we don't want to understand that we don't decide. Technology and consumers decide, and technology and consumers override our decision. So we need to go with the stream, because otherwise we are going to fail. This is, and consumers are driven by technology, not from an ideological standpoint, but from a pure speculative standpoint. So which is the best technology I can buy and can serve me at the cheapest possible way, and today is renewable. This is a given. I don't know, I don't want to waste anyone's time to fact check this, but this is not the topic. So we have a big, huge problem with supply chain in Europe, meaning that we need to invest in industry which will decrease dramatically the dependence, which is not 93%, it's far less, but doesn't matter. It's that we have on, let's say, precious minerals. So we need to do something. Guess what? We need cheap energy to transform this idea in palpable, realistic, industrial project to have a local supply chain. Because whatever we are going to do, if we don't provide, and this is the competitive advantage of China, for example, cheap energy. So why did everybody go to China and give and make them their factories and production of goods, of appliances? Because it was cheaper. Because we have been driven by this. So if we want to repeat the story again and again and think that the outcome will be a different one, this is the perfect route. If we want to take a stand and a decision, we choose something. And again, my problem, my main concern is the dependency of one commodity. I want to control my commodity. The only commodity I can control in this very moment is the natural one. So wind and solar. And this puts us in a very different competitive situation. I wanted only to open a parenthesis. Yes, there are funds available. Modernization funds is one of it. I have to say that the current, and I repeat, current management of the Ministry of Energy is speeding up the process in a dramatic way, yet this will be absolutely insufficient to create and to revamp the network or any system, because it's a drop in the ocean. So if somebody thinks that European funds or public funding will solve the problem, it's a huge mistake. Still, you will need to rely on private investment. Private investment from an industrial standpoint needs cheap energy and, let's say, less bureaucratic legal and regulatory framework. And then you have to guarantee this predictability, let's say, that is a mantra, but okay, this is something that we will discuss even in the next 5 years, how to achieve predictability, while we will have cheaper price of energy, of course.
I want to stay a little bit on this subject of dependency towards China. And at a certain point, Daniela, Commissioner Breton was mentioning the strategic autonomy of Europe. Do you think that this is an achievable goal? And if it is an achievable goal, how long will it take for Europe to be more independent, let's say, or less independent, less dependent, especially?
Very interesting question, but if you allow me, I would like,
Yes,
I really need to step into the previous conversation a little bit, if you don't mind.
Apparently, the minister is running a bit late, so we have enough time.
Okay.
So
So, what I would like, I was thinking while listening Alessio and Mr. Weber that it so very much depends how someone addresses a question, because, and again, I'm not anti-renewables. I feel that I need to start with this statement. And yes, it is true, probably nowadays. I knew that also hydro, it is as competitive as wind and PV, but let's not enter into that. And if we take the levelized cost of energy, yeah, these electricity sources are cheaper as compared to the others. But it very much depends how you address the question into what do I want to invest, because if we move upper and look at the system costs, in fact, we'll discover that the answer is significantly different. First of all, because we cannot do it just with renewables technically, and I think that's a big issue. I would also argue on the dependence on other markets and commodities conversation, but a very clear, also out of nature reality is that we do have the sun shining few hours a day, and we have the wind blowing some parts, sometime, not all the time. And in order to have all the time all these lights on, we need to have backup facilities which will cover when the other two natural resources are not available. And according to scientific analysis, we need to triple the energy capacity. And that means that at the end, for the consumers, being them households, for which probably, yes, we can tackle alternative solutions as prosumers legislation. When you look at the macro level, at the country level, from a competitive perspective, I think we have to have this full analysis of the system cost.
You are absolutely right, if I may respond. It's clear, yeah, and this panel is also about innovation, right? Mm-hmm. And it is, okay, what innovations do we actually need, no? And in order to solve some of the problems you say, we need, of course, innovation or investments in storage, yeah, day-night problem, seasonal storage capacities. Yeah? That's what we need. No? We also need fuel cells, yeah, on the road to decarbonize the transportation. So there is not only one solution, but the main source, the key source, if we want to reach our decarbonization goals, is only green energy. Yeah. That is the source. We just need to, let's say, to solve the intermittence problem. Yeah? And therefore we need storage, therefore we need grids, and therefore we need, let's say, other technologies which help to use at maximum capacity. And by the way, to reach its targets, Romania will need to bring until 2030 10 to 12 gigawatt, yeah, of capacity on stream. That's a lot. But you know what the beautiful thing is, to bring on stream renewables, it takes, if you do it right, eventually 2-3 years. To bring other kind of capacities on streams, you might need 10 to 12 years. That is, I mean, it's not because we like the sun and we like the water, yeah, or whatever, yeah, or it is about the feasibility, yeah, and the availability of technology which exists. We just need to use it.
May I?
Please, and then.
So let's look at the market. Which are the companies that are market successful in the energy sector, and which are the ones that have problems in the energy sector? The ones that are investing in renewables are skyrocketing in the last 5 years. The other that are investing in other technologies, old technologies, are having huge problems. It's a market-driven, okay? Because, again, we have to put the consumer, okay, in the center of the... Unfortunately, in our sector, the energy sector, the consumer was a guy that at the end of the day had to pay a bill.
Or a
not,
lady.
Or not, okay? And the biggest revolution or changing factor in the energy transition is that we start from the consumer and then we build up. It's like asking to horse traders, okay, when Ford started to make the 4T, is like asking to a horse trader, do you agree that you should make factories, cheap factories for doing cheap cars available for everybody? And the horse trader, which it was the dominant transportation tool at those times, would say, no, let's stop it. Let's stop it, because we trade horses. You are killing. The idea of innovation is that inevitably something has to be killed to put something new instead that is working, and then it also will be killed in the future because it's how the things works. So at the end of the day, if any other energy production sources can arrive to 10, 15 euros per megawatt hour for end consumer, taking out hydrogen, hydroelectric, old investment, ammortizzate, not new investment, okay? This is a different story. So if we can find other sources of production of energy that are arriving at 10, 50 euros per megawatt, fantastic. If not, we start from that and we build everything around, because people cannot afford anymore to pay 200 euros per megawatt hour for sources of energy that are expensive and create a dependency risk for the commodity topic. It's as simple as that.
I think Daniela and Larissa want to
Just
answer to
very
that.
briefly, this horse owner, if promised to receive a subsidy for each horse having, and instead has the possibility.
Which is happening.
Yes, exactly. That's why renewables are great. You know, that's why they are skyrocketing. And again, not diminishing the merits of renewables. Business-wise, if you have to do an investment where you are promised a subsidy for each kilowatt.
Without any kind of
Alessio, I think also Larissa wants to answer to this.
No, but let's compare horses with horses, cars with cars.
So I want to say I really love this conversation because it's much overdue, and we don't often get to have so much fun on a panel. So I want to pick up on Daniela's point, because at the Clean Air Task Force, we actually ran a model recently where we looked at multiple risks. We wanted to maximize energy security. We looked at Dunkelflaute in the most historic, so when there's no sun and no wind for longer periods of time. And we really wanted to maximize energy systems stability while keeping systems costs as low as possible. And then we also took into account that the wind power goals, I said earlier, we still have to build 100 gigs of wind to reach European Union targets by 2030, which is just around the corner. And what we found is at the same cost, we could build a grid that is extremely stable, much more stable, extremely energy secure, meets the needs of decarbonization, but it would have 250 gigs of nuclear and 60 gigawatts of gas with CCS. And there's right now around 100 gigs of nuclear in Europe, or maybe 97, something like that, right? So I just wanted to give you an overview of if you're looking at, and this is a scenario, this is not a forecast, but there is an advantage to having a multi-source or options-based electricity grid that has maximum amount of renewables, but also maximum amount of energy security that has multitude of technologies.
Thank you so much. And this has been a very, very interesting conversation. I Normally, I would have to be polite and give you the floor for one last word, but we're running out of time. So thank you so much for this wonderful and interesting and lively conversation. I think we can continue it. But now I will pass the floor to my colleague, Cristian Pârvulescu, who is the director of the program Energy and Sustainability at the Aspen Institute and CEO of Enevo.